And it's not because they're greens. It's actually what I've realized, and it's in a book that I've just published, is that the green movement became so successful, it grew so big. Greenpeace, from the times when we used to sleep in sleeping bags on the floors of kind of little deserted offices in the docks in East London, it now has a big office, hundreds of employees, and millions of pounds of turnover, subscriptions to maintain. So when the board meets, it's not the old guys who used to be on the boats, it's the accountants, it's the public relations people, it's the public resource management people, it's the political lobbyists, to the point where the recently retiring director of Greenpeace, Stephen Tyndall, now when he was first appointed, I thought, come on guys, what are you doing? He used to be political advisor to Tony Blair. He's a political apparatchik. Suddenly he's green? What? No, he stays in post for however many years, and then this year he retired. And the first thing he said when he retired, he said, the only thing that's going to save us from global warming, guess what it is? Nuclear power. So the press went nuts and just said, hey look, the Greens now think nuclear power. Look, Stephen Tyndall, the whole deal. So is this conspiracy theory? Was he placed in there? No, I don't think so. I think it's just the dynamic of it all. That it suits so many people, this story. And it's in a backdrop of a great shift and change that's occurring anyway in global consciousness. And so there's whenever consciousness shifts in the kind of culture that we're dealing with, spending patterns shift. And there's all kinds of things afoot to try to get you to do this and to do that. So I'm going to try and follow this with... So what I've been looking at is the way in which consciousness and the climate are shifting and changing together. So when we think about consciousness, we've got to think about how human beings have become conscious and how consciousness itself changes, because obviously it has changed in human history. So it's about our sense of purpose, of what causes what, meaning, aspiration, and also who is in control. It's kind of like the locus of control. And if you think of tribal society, you know pretty much where you are and where the power structure is, and how to get to it and how to change it. It's all within your reach. Consciousness itself evolved in a period of tribal history. The whole of human consciousness is only about 100,000 years old. It's a small amount of the time of the evolution of apes, for example, and of human form. We were exactly the same form as we are now 100,000 years ago. Suddenly there was this tall, very beautiful, very graceful ape, and it became conscious. And I call that shamanic consciousness. It was a consciousness of being at one with the whole of creation. And if you've hung out with tribal peoples, as I have, I also studied anthropology, and I've been with tribal peoples, they have a happiness, a strength, a vitality, they have a trust, they live in abundance, they feel free, they're equal, men and women, and they perceive the whole of creation not only as like being penetrated by a creative spirit, a holding spirit, but of all the species of plants and animals as supporting their consciousness. And the shamanic consciousness can extend itself to any of those species and know what it feels like to be a bird, to be a serpent. And some of our deepest meanings are attached to elements of the animal kingdom. The serpent is the deepest symbol we have for healing. And in India it's the symbol for the Kundalini, which rises in the base of the spine and creates the highest forms of consciousness. So some of our deepest teachings are actually shamanic. But once agriculture came along, things started to shift from shamanic to what I will call half shamanic, half religious. And so for several thousand years, a whole process of religion taking over interpretation of consciousness took place. And eventually, the shamanic disappeared, the religious came in. And with the religious, a massive period of very dangerous repression, when to be a heretic meant the death sentence. To be a wise woman or a healer, also a death sentence. In the West, we experienced our own Holocaust for a period of about 500 years, when women in particular were ritually executed for any sign of shamanic consciousness. That transition took place, and from that space developed scientific consciousness. It was like, hey, we're not going to go anywhere near that religion. And the whole of science, in a way, can be viewed as a reaction to religion. The really strange thing is that those first scientists who set up the Royal Society, they were all magicians. They were alchemists. They had another agenda in relation to how they saw consciousness. But they kept that secret. And the whole of science was then fed into what was then developing, which was a kind of merchant empire. And science allied with the merchants, with the industrialists, and with the military. It did not ally itself with the common people. And so from that perspective, science has grown to give us this world, this technology, with its elites and with its little secret meetings and secret societies, which at a conspiracy camp you'll know all about. That is the backdrop from which the human mind in that context looks at climate change. So you've got to then have a little bit of a perspective as to what science and technology, in cahoots with the merchants, the bankers and the military, has actually constructed. And then look at climate change, and then look at what's being offered. So I don't want to kind of go straight down that road without giving you some of the backdrop in relation to what's happening with the climate. That there's one underlying theme which, if you understand this, you'll understand the whole issue. And that is, climate change is in cycles. And the computer models and the scientific world do not incorporate those cycles. I'll show you what the consequences of that are, which is that you have all kinds of predictions which are not going to come true. Something else is going to happen because the cycles are kicking in. But the question right at the front should also be why? Why doesn't science include those cycles? It's the nature of cycles themselves. They're formed from waveforms, they're complex, and most importantly, they have irregular periods. They're unpredictable. There's something within the scientific male mind that not only can't handle that mathematically, but I believe actually can't handle it psychologically. The reason that scientists don't like cycles and don't build them into their models is because there's a gender bias in in science itself. It's a man issue. Global warming is essentially something that is told to you as man-made. Cycles cannot be predicted or controlled. They're impossible to model accurately. And as I say, there's also this kind of deep-seated male aversion to the whole feminine realm. And there could be a feminine mathematics. It's very linked to music and it's very linked to harmonics, but it does not exist within the science world of the computer modelers. So in many ways, science has evolved not only as an anti-religious thing, it's also evolved as an anti-feminine thing. And I don't mean particularly against women, there are many women scientists. But the feminine is that realm that involves a surrender to a phenomena and feeling it on a body level. That science does not do. If you are in nature and you surrender to nature and you feel it on a body level, you have a different kind of knowledge. and understanding of cycles than if you go out and measure stuff, turn it into mathematics and put it into a virtual reality, into a computer model. And the really amazing thing at this time is that that virtual reality of a computer model is now directing a massive global movement, trillions of dollars, to go into carbon trading, carbon finance, carbon currency, carbon banks, with a whole elite of monitors, regulators, scientists, checkers, that whole administration. It's massive. It's become a cause célèbre. It's a rallying point. But you don't actually have to do anything now. In fact, you can't do anything now. It's something in the future. It will require stealth taxes. And it creates an alliance between science and politicians.